Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm going through our Blood Red Skies flight school. In this flight school, we're going to be talking about actually playing the game. Now, how to start? Well, we recommend that you start with scenario 0, which is intruder flight. And once you've mastered those rules, then move on to more advanced rules. But right here, I'm just going to show you the basic rules. Okay, there is a turn order. That's and you can see on your card here, there's a turn order. But basically, in a nutshell, advantage will go before neutrals, and neutrals will go before disadvantaged. So, if you're in an advantage position, you're always going to go before a neutral. If you have a bunch of advantaged people, then you go in order of pilot skill. So it's advantage with pilot skill 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. Then you move on to neutral, and then the neutrals go 5, 4, 3, and 2. And then disadvantage goes 5, 4, 3, and 2. And then that's the end of the turn. And then you move on to the next, then you restart. Now if you have tied initiative, like you're both pilot 3 and you're both with advantage, then you go by the speed value of the plane. Now these two planes have the same speed, but if I had a Blenheim out here with a speed of 5, then either one of these 7s would go before the 5. But because both of these are the same, we would actually look at their real speed, and then the real speed would be the tiebreaker. Now when you get to activate your plane, okay, when you go to activate your plane, you have a little box right here on the chart telling you what you do and in what order. Number 1 is shoot. If you're in a firing position at the start of your activation, you just go ahead and fire, right? You just shoot at your opponent and you just measure the range using the range ruler. Okay, so let's say something's like this. It has to be laid down. It has a curved area on the range ruler that goes against your base, and as long as your stick lays on top of their base or touches their base in any way, you're in range. And then you go through the firing, and we'll go into that in a minute. But we're still talking about activating. The next activation is burn your advantage. So if you are at advantage, let's say, and you want to shoot this gentleman there, and you do, that's fine. Then you go on to burn your advantage. There are 3 things you can do, or 2 things. 2 things you can do when you burn advantage. You can maneuver. That means turn up to 100 degrees at any point during your movement, or you can dive. Which, if you dive, when you burn advantage, you take your whatever position you are in advantage and you bring it down 1 step. So if I was neutral, I would go to disadvantage. If I was at advantage, I would switch to neutral. And then I can add 6 inches to my move this turn. So if this has a speed of 7, this is saying you would add 6, making that a 13-inch move. And then you would move 13 points, right? And it says you have to move at least half of your maximum speed, rounding up. So if I have a 13, I've got to move at least 7, and then but I could move a full 13. And then at the end of my move, I can turn up to 45 degrees. The turn is done at the end of your turn. And it says right here, an aircraft must always move at least half of its move. And then up here it says up to your move, and then turn up to 45 degrees. So your move is pretty straightforward. Yeah, and literally straightforward. So if I don't burn the advantage, let's say I don't burn my advantage, I don't dive, I could move 7, because that's my move. And the way you do that is, as you see, I lined the maneuver range ruler against my plane, with my plane fitting into that slot, lined up with the little arrow. Then I would pick my plane up and I would set it down with, if you notice, the back edge on the 7 mark. 7 back edge, right? And then I would line my arrow up with the center line that goes through this whole thing, hold my plane where it belongs, pull the range ruler out. That was a 7-inch move. And then at the end of my move, I could decide to turn up to 45 degrees. That's part of my move. That was my move. Now, after move, there comes the pilot action. Okay, we already described the move. I really didn't need to do that because I just want to show everything, and then we're going to go over each piece individually. By pilot action, after the plane has completed its move, the controller player can choose one pilot action, and there are 3. There is shooting, so I can shoot again. So like if I find myself in a position to shoot again, like I shot him here, then I moved up and turned to face, I could shoot again. Or I could use my pilot action to outmaneuver an opponent, or I could use my pilot action to climb, which will get me my advantage back. And then end activity. So to end your activity, you take a zoom chit and you put it by your plane saying he's already been activated. So he can't be activated twice in a turn. You won't, because if you have like a dozen planes on the table, it might be hard to remember on the top of your head which planes have already been activated and which ones haven't. And by placing these chits out there, you don't have to remember. Alright, so now let's go into the mechanics of each one of those activations. We're going to go back into this position where I was originally, and then we're just going to go through each step, and I'm going to explain each individual rule in detail. Shooting, right? Because that's the first thing you do is shoot. Now there are limitations on who you can shoot. It says advantage can shoot neutral or disadvantaged. So you can always shoot down. So level and down. Neutral can only shoot down. So you can never shoot equal. So if you're both neutral, you can't shoot each other. You have to have an advantage level greater than your target. That's really all there is. So disadvantage will never get to shoot because there's nothing, because if something was at disadvantage, they would not be able to shoot them because that's the same. And if you're at neutral, you can't shoot neutral or advantage. You have to shoot down to disadvantage. And if you're at advantage, you can shoot everything except advantage because it's the same level as you. And in the gray there, it says disadvantage airplanes cannot shoot. Period. Okay, so if you can shoot, because in this situation you can shoot, the shooting range for all planes is 6 inches. And you use the range template to resolve the shooting action. You declare a shooting action. He has to be in your forward 90 degrees, which is 45 degrees to the right and 45 degrees to the left. So if he's in there, you shoot, and then you declare your shooting action, and you make sure he's at a lower advantage level. Check the range. Now to resolve the shooting action, the shooter adds his pilot level to his plane's fire value, 1. So he's the 109, so he adds 1, so that's a total of 4, and rolls that many dice. So he rolls that many dice, and he's hoping for one of them or more to be the ace result. If it is, then a hit is scored, and a boom chit is given to your opponent. Not to the plane. We don't put the boom chit on the plane. The plane's not damaged. We take the boom chit and we give it to our opponent. That means his team, his side, has received damage. Once the hit is scored, now the target plane tries to dodge the attack by rolling a number of dice equal to the sum of the pilot skill, which in this case is 4, plus the agility, in this case is 3, so add 3 more dice. If at least one ace is rolled, then he dodges. No aces, so he did not dodge. If he's hit, then the target loses 1 advantage level. So basically by shooting at him, you forced him down. If he succeeded on the roll, then he would not dive. And there's the shooting test on the card. It says firepower plus pilot is the number of dice you attack with. Dodging is your agility plus pilot is the number of dice you dodge with. Now, when I shot, if I had gotten 2 aces or more, then that would be considered a critical hit. And in that case, your opponent gets 1 less dice to roll to dodge. Okay, now there's a couple of things called positional shooting. And the shooting could be influenced by the relative position of the shooter. Let's talk about head-on shots. So maybe my shooter is there and he's advantage over a neutral and he's getting ready to shoot him. A shooting attack that comes onto the front arc of a plane is called a head-on. In this case, the target is allowed to counterattack by shooting back regardless of their advantage state. So this is the only time that a disadvantaged plane would be able to shoot back. And the shots are done simultaneously. They basically just shoot back and forth, they make their dodge rolls, and whatever happens, happens. Now there is something called deflection. So let's say my shot is coming in from the side. And the side, guess what, is the 45-degree arc that is marked on the base. The target can use its speed instead of its agility as its dodge roll. Usually your speed is going to be much higher than your agility. Like even a Blenheim, his speed is 5 and his agility is 1. So on a deflection shot, he would be rolling 5 plus the pilot skill, where like on these 109s or the Spitfires getting shot from the side, he gets to roll 7 plus his pilot skill. So 7 plus, in this case, 4, he'd be rolling 11 dice to dodge. Since you don't count ammo and you don't lose your advantage to shoot, and he's not in his front where he gets to shoot back, there's no reason not to fire. Just shoot. Don't say something like, well, I got deflection, so I'm going to hold my shot. No, just shoot. There's no jamming, there's no losing your ammo, nothing like that. Okay, so that was shooting. That's how you do the shooting. Now let's get back to this, and let's go to burn advantage. Let's say I shot him, nothing happened. Let's just say. Burn advantage. The 2 things you can do. You can dive, adding 6 to your movement, or you can maneuver 180 degrees at any point during your movement. Okay, that 180 degrees at any point during your movement replaces the 45-degree movement during your move. So you don't get to burn advantage, move 180 degrees, and then at the end of your move do a 45. You can't do that. And you can't split this 180. So I can't say I'm going to burn advantage, move a little bit, turn 90, move a little bit, turn 90. No, you can't do that. Okay. Because burning advantage is not diving, right? Because I'm maneuvering, it doesn't add 6 to my movement. It only allows me to exchange the 45-degree turn at the end of my turn to a 180-degree turn at any point during my turn. Okay, now there was a little disagreement about this rule at the latest convention that I went to, saying that you had to move at least half of your move straight forward before you could use that 180 degrees. But according to the rule book, and that is where I'm at, make a turn of up to 180 degrees at any point during the airplane's movement. This replaces the normal 45-degree turn at the end of the movement. After this turn, the aeroplane can continue its move up to its maximum speed. Okay, so what that implies is I could burn advantage, turn 180 degrees or less at the start of my turn if I wanted to, and then move my 7. That's kind of what it's telling me. Not that I'd want to do that, but you never know. You might want to do that. Or, let's say you're here. He shoots, right? Fine. And then he could burn advantage. Move, I don't know, 3. Then turn 180 degrees. Then move 4. If he wanted to do that, he could do that. That's fine. Okay. So that's what maneuvering is saying. If you maneuver, you're burning your advantage to get that extra 180 degrees. You could do it at the start, the middle, the end, at any point during your move. And you only have to move up to half of your movement. So if it was movement 7, he only has to move 4 because you round up. Or you could dive. And we already discussed dive. So if you're burning your advantage, boom, basically you're diving, add 6 to your movement. It has to be 100% straightforward because this 45-degree turn is done at the end of your movement. Now once you get your maneuver out of the way or your dive out of the way, you add the 6-inch or you exchange the 45-degree turn for a 180 at any point during your movement. Then you go to actual move. And this says your move is either 6 plus your move number or it's your move number. And then you move and change 45 degrees. So he moves and he doesn't have to turn 45, he can stay. That's an option. Okay, that's moving. That's simple. Now what they're saying is you're supposed to use the caliper to measure 45 degrees, but you already know that you have a 45-degree arc to the right and a 45-degree arc to the left. So just use these lines right here. Don't even worry about the caliper. Now we haven't talked about pilot action because there's a rule that jumps in the middle of this called tailing. Tailing is not an activation. It's just a situation that you become in. And if you're tailing someone, then you use the tailing rule. And here we go. Okay, tailing. Tailing is extremely important in setting up your opponent for getting shot at by friends. It also helps position an attack for the future. When you are able to maneuver into your rear of your opponent's tail arc, right, which is his 45-degree arc, you're within gunfire range, and your front arrow is pointing at his base within the front arc, not within 45 degrees. So I'm not tailing when I'm turned like that, right? Even though he's in my front arc, that's not tailing. You would think it should be, but it's not. Your front has to actually be pointing directly at somewhere in this base. If it is, he is tailed. Tailing automatically, immediately reduces the disadvantage state all the way down to disadvantaged. So even if he's in an advantage state, it doesn't matter. If you get in a tailing position, he shoots all the way down to disadvantaged. Okay, and this happens between the pilot's move and the pilot action. So you can't climb for advantage and then claim a tailing position. And you can only claim tailing on one plane at a time. You can't be, even though there might be multiple planes here, you decide which one you're tailing and he drops to disadvantage. It's most commonly used to set up another plane to shoot him. So limitations. A plane cannot claim to be tailing if it's in disadvantage itself, or if it's in the front arc of a neutral or advantaged enemy plane within 6 inches. So what they mean by that is, let's say he's at neutral. Let's say you're at neutral. And let's say he's got a wingman that's over here. And you say, hey, I'm tailing this guy. You're not, because you're in his front arc. And if he's at neutral or advantaged, he's preventing you from tailing him. It's called the wingman effect. But he also has to be within 6 inches of you. Now let's talk about the last point pilot action. Pilot action. When it comes to your pilot action, you choose one of the abilities: shooting, outmaneuvering, or climbing. One of the three. If you're in a position to shoot, you can just shoot, bang. Or you can outmaneuver. A player can try to outmaneuver an enemy fighter that is within 9 inches, which is the length of the point to point here. So you could be a mile away, and as long as you're within 9 inches, you could attempt to outmaneuver this guy. Any enemy fighter that is within 9 inches of your plane. It can be made regardless of advantage level. So I could be at neutral, you could be at advantage, I could be facing away from you. I can still outmaneuver you. It's basically any plane within 9 inches. Period. To resolve an outmaneuvering action, the controlling player compares his pilot skill of the planes involved. The target plane adds 1 to its pilot value if it's not the closest enemy. So if there's one here, and he's trying to outmaneuver him, he gets a +1 to his pilot skill because he's actually the closest plane. Pilots with the higher skill level outmaneuver lower skilled pilots automatically. Okay, so he's a 4, he's a 3, he's not outmaneuvered automatically. Otherwise, the target must make a maneuver test. Okay, so if this guy was attempting to outmaneuver him, it would happen automatically because he's a 4, he's a 3. But because he's trying to punch above his weight class, this guy, he could still succeed by making him make a piloting test. They call it a maneuver test. In order to resolve a maneuver test, the target plane rolls a number of dice equal to its pilot value plus his agility. So 3 plus 4, he's rolling 7 dice. If he was not the closest, then it would be 8 dice. But right now it's 7 dice. And if at least one of them is a spade, then he succeeds. He failed. No. Okay, so he failed. If the outmaneuvering action succeeds, the outmaneuvered target reduces its advantage level by 1 from advantage to neutral, or neutral to disadvantage. If they were already disadvantaged, then there's no effect. So he takes him from advantage to neutral, because his outmaneuvering action succeeded. By bringing up a spade, that would have caused his outmaneuvering action to fail. Or instead of shooting or outmaneuvering, you could elect to climb. So it's just a free increase your advantage level by 1. Boop, that's it. So a lot of times what you'll see, and this is just gameplay kind of tweaking, what you'll see is people at advantage will burn advantage at the start of their move, and then they will move the 6 plus 7, and then at the end of their move they'll use the climb action to bring themselves back to advantage. So that's really it's like a boost, like a dive and then a climb. What they call it, a zoom climb. And then once everybody's moved, and when you act, you put your little zoom counters down, and once you put all your once everybody's got a zoom counter down, that's the end of the activation order. So then everybody pulls their zoom counters off, and you start a whole new activation order. This is just a little heads up. If you start with advantage, and let's say this guy starts with neutral, during the initiative order, you'll be going first. Then he'll be going, right? But if at the end of all your activities and movements and stuff like that, you wind up in a disadvantage or a neutral state, and he winds out in an advantage state, on the following turn, now he'll be going first. So who goes first fluctuates from turn to turn based on your pilot skill, but also, most importantly, by your advantage state. All right, now that was the basic rules. You learned all the basic rules. Let's recap before I end this video. First thing is activation order. It's done based on advantage state. Advantages always go before neutrals. Neutrals go before disadvantage. If there's 2 advantage players, you go by pilot skill, starting at 5, working your way down to 2. If they're both the same, then you go by the speed of the plane. If they're both the same, then you go by the actual miles per hour of the plane. If that's the same, then basically you Rochambeau for it. During activation, when you activate your plane, you shoot if you have an opportunity to. You have to be at a higher advantage level. If you don't, then you don't. Move on to the next step. Burn advantage. You don't have to, burn advantage. If you burn advantage, it gives you an opportunity to speed up by 6, because you're flying, or maneuver, which means you can move up to 180 degrees. And you can do that at any point during your turn. Any point includes the start. Move. You move up to your speed, which is normally 7, but if you dove, it would be 6 more. So then, I'm saying 7 because of this plane, and then it would be 6 more. So you would move, and then you could turn up to 45 degrees. If you burned advantage, then it would just be your move speed, turn 180 degrees at any point, then move at least half of your move. If you're in a tailing position at that point, your opponent would drop a level. Pilot action. As a pilot action, you can shoot if you're in a shooting position. You could outmaneuver any opponent within 9 inches, or you would climb. When you're shooting, you roll a number of dice equal to your firepower plus your pilot skill level. You're looking for aces. If you get 1 ace, it's a hit. You give your opponent's side a boom chit. If you get 2 aces, then that's a critical. That still is only 1 boom chit, but it means your opponent gets a -1 on his dodge roll. Dodge rolls are evasion or agility plus his pilot skill level. Or if the shot is coming at deflection, you get his speed, if he wants to, which 9 out of 10 times you would want to, plus your pilot skill. So you get a lot more dice to evade. If you fail, then you go down 1 level of advantage. Here's something that's not really been mentioned. If you're at disadvantage, you get shot at, and you fail your dodge, and you're forced to go down 1 more advantage. That's when the plane is shot down. When you end your activation, you add a zoom chip, and then once everybody's added their zoom chips, the round is over. You pull it off. Now, the reason why a side would get boom chits, based on this scenario, you'll decide how many boom chits it takes to eliminate the side. So if this boom, like if they get 10 boom, they might have a limit of 10. So when they get to 10, you win. And then you might have a limit of 9 because your guys are a little bit more shaky or something like that. Who knows? Then if they are able to do 9 back at you, then you lose. And that's how you win the match, is by either shooting everybody down, which is hard actually, or giving them enough boom chits to get their side to flee. All right, well, thanks for coming out and checking out the basic gameplay. In the next video, we'll be going on to more advanced rules. I'll see you then.